This is the Leafs Convo. I am pleased to be joined once again by the former Assistant General Manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Mr. Bill Waters. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always. The Toronto Maple Leafs face a familiar foe in the postseason in the first round, the Boston Bruins, their arch rival in the Atlantic Division, starting on Thursday at TD Garden. Bill, just lead off here because I haven't talked to you since before the deadline. The Leafs didn't make many changes at the deadline and then ran into a mini crisis in March because of the injuries to Jake Gardiner and Travis Dermott. They had a rough March and then sort of pulled out of it a little bit at the end. But going into the playoffs, I know that Mike Babcock was talking a good game in terms of being positive and in terms of the matchups and throwing away the memories of last year. But, this team really did struggle down the stretch and I think didn't live up to some expectations. What did you think of the Leafs leading up to the playoffs?
Well, I don't want to be an I told you so, but I told you so in November that if they didn't make significant changes to their defense, they're going nowhere. And they didn't. They did make one change, which was deemed by their general manager to be significant, but which has turned out to be nothing more than a giveaway. First-round pick and 2 seconds for Jake Muzzin. That was not well-researched. And Jake Muzzin is a 5'6" defenseman, just like I thought he was. And when he plays with Drew Doughty, he's 2'3". Well, there's only one Drew Doughty. So I was disappointed in management in a number of areas. In management, I include Brendan Shanahan and Kyle Dubas because you can't be too difficult on Kyle Dubas. This is his first year as a general manager, and anybody that thinks Garrett Sparks is going to be an NHL goaltender obviously needed more experience in the field before he took over the job. Having said that, the coaching performance of Mike Babcock has been subpar at best, and I don't have any explanation for that. I don't know why, whether he's disenchanted with who he's reporting to or if he's disenchanted with the troika that he works with. It's my business to ask, but it's not my business to say because I really don't know. I just know that Mike Babcock is not himself and has done things, particularly as it refers to the Nylander situation, which was just an abysmal mismanagement program that you could put on the hockey dictionary under mismanagement. And that includes the coach, the president, and the general manager. Nylander did more to set that team back than the 2 injuries to the defenseman.
I've picked up, and I'm one of many who have picked up on what I perceive as a philosophical divide between Babcock and Dubas. Now, we know that Babcock in the past with Lou Lamoriello as general manager, he put it out there in press conferences, and I was at the morning skates and listening to him say, well, I think we need a fourth-line center, just coming out and sort of lobbying through the media for that. And Lamoriello obliged. He went out and got Brian Boyle 2 years ago. He went out and got Plekanec last year. I think both were not smart moves, but he did act on what his head coach was looking for. This year, he got the defenseman in Muzzin, but the problem was they needed a right-handed defenseman. He's a left-hand shot. Daryl Sutter said Muzzin can't play the right side. Babcock basically said he can't play the right side. I'm going to put him on the left. And they were loaded on the left, so he really didn't help them as much as you would think giving up the package that they did. And at the deadline, he doesn't go out and get a veteran forward. He gets Nick Patan, who's basically a 13th or 14th forward for this team. So I pick up on this philosophical divide, and eventually, and we know that Babcock has 4 years left in his contract. Eventually, I think it's going to end up with Babcock leaving or getting fired, but I don't think that's going to happen right away. But I do think that philosophical divide, Bill, is affecting this team right now.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, Mike, and a lot of things could happen. I don't know what will happen, but one of the scenarios is Babcock going to Buffalo. And I don't consider that to be something that's going to happen tomorrow, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't be surprised because of what you just said. There's a significant divide between Shanahan and his boy and Mike Babcock, and it's not going to be easily resolved. Matt Martin was taken away from Babcock, and Matt Martin was the guy that Babcock needs more than anything else right now on the day before they play the Boston Bruins. There is nobody on that lineup of 20 players that has the ball bearings to get down and dirty and have to challenge somebody physically on the other team. And I'm not a proponent of fighting, as you know. I'm not against it, but I'm not a proponent of it. I like spontaneous battles as opposed to staged, but I do like to have a guy on my team that can defend my best player. On one night in particular against Florida, they ran Freddie Anderson twice. There wasn't a finger nor a hockey stick raised in defense of their best player. And then they started to molest Tavares. And one guy came to their rescue, Ron Hainsey, the oldest player on the team. That was publicly embarrassing, and any player on the Leaf team should know that. That's not the way you do business. You don't send the old man out to defend for what is a young man's game. And I was bitterly disappointed in the team that calls itself the Toronto Maple Leafs, because there aren't too many Leaf teams that wouldn't have defended their goaltender, a.k.a. their best player, and their highest scorer. And that team did not, other than Ron Hainsey. And good for Ron Hainsey. But that's the commentary on the Leafs. How can you expect the Leafs to play the game that has to be played in order to match the Bruins? It's just not part of them. They don't play hockey that way. There's no compete in half of them. The most competitive player they have, they put him on the third line as their centerman. And I can tell you this, and this is not outlandish, this is my opinion. Nazem Kadri as the first center on the Toronto Maple Leafs would be better as the first center than either Tavares or Austin Matthews. And leave it at that.
Well, one of the concerns going into this series, and one of the reasons that I'll be announcing my picks for the first round on Hockey Buzz later today. But one of the reasons I'm picking Boston, and I was up in Toronto on Monday at the morning skate and talking to some reporters, and getting the feedback of some of the fans. I think everybody is picking Boston, and the way the Leafs have played in the second half, I think, is a direct contributor to that. But I also think that the team that Boston is, the type of hockey that they play, and the fact that basically the only pushback the Leafs have on their roster is Kadri, as you mentioned, and Zach Hyman. And other than that, they really don't have any disturbers. They really don't have any antagonists. They're a pure skill team. They're going to try to win with speed and skill and scoring on the power play. And Bill, I see the Bruins trying to run them out of the building, and that's the only way the Leafs win is if they can resist that and score when Boston is shorthanded. Other than that, that's the advantage I see Boston having. What do you think?
Well, I think exactly that. And the Leafs, built on speed and skill, are not strong enough physically to challenge the Bruins to draw penalties. That's what a speed and skill team does. They have the speed to get away. They have the speed to move around. And when they go, that's when a penalty is called. Leafs don't get any penalties called against them. They just don't.
Yeah, they were the lowest in the league.
They don't want to do anything that might resemble hard work. They want to be able to skate around people instead of through. And until and when they start doing some of the skating through, the Leafs will never, ever be the team that they might be. And I quite frankly think they're grossly overrated.
Yeah, I mean, Babcock referenced that on Monday. He said, the entire regular season, it was fun, it was skating, there were jerseys flapping, blah, blah, blah. But then, this is work. You have to get to work. And it's okay to have fun, but, when it comes to the playoffs, it is hard work to get it done. And I look at it and I see a team that has worked hard for 82 games in the Bruins, a team that's top 5 in goals against, has a number one line that's probably the best line or one of the best 2 or 3 lines in the league in Pasternak, Marchand, and Bergeron. And I see a team built for the postseason. And, I mean, the Leafs are extremely talented, Bill, but I think that they have to learn the lesson of skilled teams like Washington back in the day who kept losing round after round until last year. They were tough. They were a pain in the butt, and they had a guy like Tom Wilson as a sort of sheriff out there. I don't see that from the Leafs right now. And anything is possible. They can win based on skill, but I think they come up against the wrong team to try to win a skill-on-skill or a contrasting styles type of series.
Well, they're just not good enough. The Bruins, it's a given. What you've just said is absolutely fact and is backed empirically. The other problem they've got is they turn the puck over than most every team in hockey. And I didn't get this on my own. I was watching an interview when a guy said, how would the Leafs expect to beat the Bruins when on an annualized basis the Bruins have 600 turnovers, the Leafs have 900? Nothing need be said beyond that. And if the Leafs can, on one 4-day practice session, eliminate 300 turnovers, then we got a series. But right. 300 prorated, of course. But they can't. They're too timid to take the hit. They'd rather throw the puck into the center of the ice.
Yeah, at the end of the year, it was like poking the puck with the stick, not getting in the areas where you were going to get rubbed against the boards. I mean, it could be that they were told, don't get injured before the playoffs, but they're going to have to get into the corners, get the puck, and win battles, and the Bruins are much better than that. Now I look at the series, and I think the only hope that the Leafs have, and we're going back to this because in the past this was always the case. The only hope that they have is Cujo standing on his head or Eddie Balfour standing on his head. Well, I think the only hope in this series is if Freddie Anderson stands on his head. And he didn't play well down the stretch. He only played 60 games as opposed to 66 the last few years. But I still think that 60 games is too much for a goaltender in the modern age, and I think that the fact that they had a backup in Garrett Sparks who was not capable of playing more hurt this team. But what do you think of Anderson going into the playoffs, Bill?
Well, first of all, there is no question, Mike, in my estimation, that Garrett Sparks hurt the team a lot. Psychologically, a great deal. When you've got a goalie who you have to put in on back-to-back games, your thought process focuses on the back-to-back game. And they won a couple of them. They didn't play well in most of them. And Garrett Sparks, as people pointed out to me last year in their run to the Calder Cup finals, they weren't sure whether Sparks was just a mediocre American League goalie or a backup goaltender in the American League. They knew he wasn't a National League goalie. The question then rises its ugly head. How did he become the backup after the Leafs in McElhaney had one of the best backups in the game? That is directly on Kyle Dubas to show his prowess as a general manager in the American League. And he brought up a player who couldn't play in the National League and forced him upon his head coach. There's no question that happened. And that was the beginning of the end with Dubas and Babcock. You don't do that to a coach like Mike Babcock. Give him a goaltender that can't play in the league and make him play him. So that's all I can say about the goaltending. The fact that he's only played 60 games makes no difference. He was injured. He missed a few. But if he plays like he did in the last 2 weeks, then there's no chance of an upset. And I'm with you. He's going to have to be more than stand on his head. He's going to have to spit nickels.
Yeah, and there are question marks in Boston because Tuukka Rask had a bad March as well, but they have a plan B in Halak, who actually had better statistics than Rask did and played about 40 games. So if Rask slips it early in the series, they can go to Halak. I don't perceive any instance other than injury that the Leafs are going to Michael Hutchinson, so it's going to be all on Freddie and he's really going to have to, be the guy he was in November and December before the injury, where he was on a path for the Vezina, Bill. So I think that they're going to need the Vezina Anderson to be able to win this series. Now,
I don't think they can win this series. I think it makes both of us look foolhardy to consider the winning is one of the great long shots of playoff history. Based on what we have said and tried to be polite, the Toronto Maple Leafs are not any competition for the Boston Bruins based on the way they played the whole season. When you have your best players play without compete, in other words, I'm not going into the corner, I'm not going after the puck, I'm just going to stay clear of any bruising. And that pretty much sums up most of their forwards, other than Zach Hyman and maybe Mitch Marner and Nazem Kadri. The rest like to fly, and that's good. I'm impressed. But don't talk to me about those who like to fly and put them in playoff category unless they like to fly with a team that is well-skilled and very strong. The Leafs don't fit either. Their skill level is extraordinarily overrated, but they don't like to play the game the way any team that wins a cup or advances in the playoffs has to. They've got to play with some bite. They got to play like they appear to want to win. They don't play like they appear to want to get the 60 minutes over and get another paycheck.
Yeah, and I wrote about the what the key things for the series would be a couple days ago, and one of the things that immediately when the signing of John Tavares happened and you thought of a matchup against the Bruins, you said, okay, the Bruins have Bergeron, who in the playoffs, there are not many centers better in this league than Bergeron, and David Krejci, who I think is an okay player, but he's been injured, he's getting older, he's not exactly fast, but he steps up his game in the playoffs, and you see the matchup of those two against Matthews and Tavares, and you think at the absolute worst, they would cancel each other out, which would then, lean towards the Leafs with a third line having Kadri and Marleau and Nylander is playing on that third line. That would I would put
Nylander where the sun don't shine and leave him there.
Well,
if you look at the beginning of the Leaf problem, I'll give you the date. You can have a look at it. It was December the 2nd, the day after Austin Matthews played one of his best games in Buffalo to beat the Sabres by himself. They inserted William Nylander into the lineup for no reason other than somebody told Babcock to put him in. And he has been abysmal ever since. He is now affectionately known as the $1 million a goal man. 7 tallies in 50-some games and $7 million in salary. God bless Kyle Dubas.
Well, it's funny, Bill, because I've said even before the signing that I do not believe William Nylander will be on this. And we'll talk about this after the playoffs when we have you on again. But I do not believe, and I had a former general manager on Monday say in front of me that he believes Nylander will be traded as well. And, even if Patrick Marleau retires at the end of this year, in terms of the cap situation, they're going to have to sign Marner probably for around $10 million, and they're going to have to pay Kapanen and Janssen. I don't see how they don't trade Nylander unless they're going to trade one of those other guys, and I don't think they're going to trade Janssen, Kapanen, or Marner. So I think William Nylander is playing his last games in blue and white.
Well, you then have to juxtapose that against the general manager's comments to Nylander personally, and when he said, as long as I am the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, you will never be traded. So put that one in your pipe, Mike, and smoke it.
Well, and I was personally witness to this. Nylander said that in the scrum after he was signed to the media. What Dubas said was not the same. So that was Willie's interpretation of the conversation between him and Dubas.
Who told you it was not the same?
Well, Dubas said in his comments after that, because somebody asked him about Nylander saying, that you promised that he won't be traded, and his comments were, were definitely more lawyerly in terms of not, they're not looking to trade him, but, and there was the but there. So I'm telling you right now.
Well, first of all, Dubas should never have said it. If he didn't say it, Nylander should never have said he said it. So you've got two people who don't tell the truth. One's lying.
So, yeah. So, okay, just getting back to the playoffs here, just to wrap it up. My prediction is that the Bruins will win in 6 games. If it goes 7, 7-game series are always, a flip of the coin. I think the Bruins are clearly the better team. Not has the more talent, but the better team. And the only thing that the Leafs gives the Leafs a chance in this series is Anderson stepping up and Rask being terrible. And that goaltending is always a factor in the playoffs. So that the Leafs have what I would say is a puncher's chance. But going into this season, when they were the betting favorite to win the Stanley Cup, and they have an amazing first half, this is not where I expected them to be going into the playoffs. So if they lose in the first round to the Bruins in 6 games, I think the season has been a little bit of a disappointment. But what do you think the series will end up, Bill?
Well, I think that you've made a very good and a very accurate analysis of what you're dealing with. I wouldn't change the 6 games. I hope it goes 6. But there is no chance of the Leafs winning. And if they do win, I'll be happy for them because they will have changed a lot of things that we watched for 82 games. If they're able to do that, that makes them even more the team that other people think they are, and I don't. And I'm quite willing to be flexible on this. But I just don't see the Leafs having what it takes to beat a team like the Bruins. And there'd have to be some catastrophic injuries. And to your point, if they lose Rask, they bring in a goaltender who's just as good and has proven that in teams that are much worse, playing for teams who are much worse than the Boston Bruins. And the godsend for the Leafs, if they lose their goalie, at least they got a goalie that can play in the NHL. And they didn't have up until last Thursday. And tell me why it took so long. That's a very strong internal fight between and among the coach and the general manager and the president. That's been going on for months.
Finally, Bill, who do you think will come out of the East? Who do you think will come out of the West? And if you want to venture a Stanley Cup champion, I believe Tampa is coming out of the East. They just seem like a juggernaut. And the only team I think that has a chance to beat them might be the Caps if they go on a run like they did last year. And the West is so I can't predict the West. It's so wide open. There's like 6 teams that I could see coming out of the West. I have Winnipeg coming out of the West, but I don't know. They could get eliminated in the first round. What do you think?
Well, I had Winnipeg coming out of the West until both Buffalo and Morrissey got hurt. So I'm not reserving anything. I'm picking Winnipeg to come out of the West. I would think that San Jose are ready to start playing hockey. They might be the team that at the end of the day beats Winnipeg. I don't think so. In the East, I think you have to pick the Tampa Bay Lightning, and my emotional pick are the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I pick them because if they're playing well and their goaltender continues to play well, they can beat anybody. They have proven that. I think they've beaten the Caps twice. And they can play the game the way they have to play to win. I'm concerned about their depth, but I picked them because of my relationship with the people that make the decisions there, and I have confidence in them. So the team that should be the Stanley Cup winner this year should be Tampa Bay. The only team that can beat Tampa Bay is the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I hope that doesn't happen.
Well, Bill, we'll definitely have you back after the Leafs playoff run, whether it ends in a couple weeks or ends in June, we will see. But it's always appreciate you coming on and giving us your expertise, and much appreciated. Thanks, Bill.
Michael, we'll be on exactly one day after the Leafs eliminate the Boston Bruins. And if that happens, a saliva test will be required by you and I.
Thanks, Bill.